Ayurveda was theorized a few thousand years back and is practiced up to this day. Although in theory it relates to all forms of life, in actual practice its efficacy only in the case of human beings is widely known. It is not commonly known that this science was also made applicable to other forms of life like plants and animals. Yes, Ayurveda also represents life sciences like botany, zoology, veterinary science and agriculture along with medicine. Plant science is known as Vriksha Ayurveda and animal science as Mriga Ayurveda. Ashva Ayurveda and Gaja Ayurveda represent veterinary medicine for horses and elephants respectively, while agriculture is known as Krishi Shastra. Knowledge of plants and agricultural practices are documented in ancient Indian literature. Discussions on plant science can be seen in Vedic literature, the epics, and various compendia. Ayurvedic literature refers to plants and their classification into forest trees, other trees, shrubby plants, and herbs. Shrubby plants are either climbers or shrubs as such, and herbs are flowering and non-flowering. Flowering and non-flowering trees are also distinguished. Those which bear fruits without flowers are called Vanaspati, while the flowering ones are called Druma. Arthashastra of Kautilya contains very interesting passages relating to the harvesting and management of crops and crop diseases, as well as many aspects of agroforestry. Brihad Samhita of Varahamihir contains a chapter titled Vriksha Ayurveda. It also contains chapters on allied subjects such as divining groundwater, productivity and non-productivity of land as indicated by natural vegetation, etc. The diseases of trees and their treatments are also dealt with in Brihad Samhita and Agni Purana. Chakrapani Datta, a commentator of the celebrated Ayurvedic text Charak Samhita, puts forth the theory that plants have feelings and cognitive abilities. An anthological compilation called Sarnagadhara Paddhati, written by Sarnagadhara, is yet another ancient text which in its chapter Upasana Vinod deals with an allied subject, arbory horticulture. The chapter discusses topics such as planting, soil, nourishment of plants, plant diseases and remedies, groundwater resources, etc. Surapala's text, named as Vriksha Ayurveda itself, is a systematic composition on Vriksha Ayurveda consisting of 12 chapters. The first chapter, Bhumi Nirupana, mainly deals with the classification of soil. Soil is divided into classes according to fertility and accessibility of water. The first class bears the name Jangalam, which represents the places where there is very little water and less vegetation. The next class is Anupam and comprises rich and fertile lands with irrigation facilities surrounded by thick towering trees. The third name Sadharan is assigned to ordinary lands that are neither very fertile nor infertile. The chapter Bijopti Vidhi is significant for its explanation of the grading and preservation of seeds. Before planting, the seeds should be mixed with ashes and exposed to treatment by medicated smoke. This procedure ensures full growth and health of plants. The rules of cultivation laid down in the book go very well with the latest methods adopted by present-day specialists for growing more food. The biology of trees is very lucidly and scientifically set forth in the chapter Padavivaksha. It says that the only difference between man and tree is that while the tree is rooted deep in earth with branches spread in air, man keeps his head high up and walks on his branches or legs. It says that plants and trees can suffer from hunger as well as thirst, and they need sleep too. The names and types of creepers and trees that go to sleep soon after sunset are also very carefully noted. The chapter Ropana Vidhi says that saplings dug out of their original infertile habitat and replanted in grounds rich in resources grow robustly. It also gives notes upon the length and depth of pits for replanting and also on the different types of fertilizers to be used for different kinds of plants. The chapters Nishkana Vidhi and Poshana Vidhi deal with methods of irrigation and fertilization and give directions for them. There is also information on the problems that might arise out of the danger and diseases that plants are liable to if water is allowed to stagnate around them. Fertilizers are prescribed for underdeveloped trees and plants. Not only in Vriksha Ayurveda, But also in Brihad Samhita do we come across a special type of fertilizer named Kunapajal, which is mainly made out of carcasses of animals such as deers, pigs and goats. The chapter Durmraksha is full of advice as how to plants and trees could be saved from the torments of adverse weather conditions, strong destructive winds and fiber storms. Taru Chikitsa discusses the treatment of plants. Ayurvedic medicine is based on the idea that the world is made up of 5 elements: space, water, earth, fire and air. A combination of each element results in 3 humors or doshas known as Vata, Pitta and Kapha. These doshas are believed to be responsible for a person's physiological, mental and emotional health. A person's unique ratio of Vata, Pitta and Kapha is said to define their Ayurvedic constitution, a blueprint to achieve optimal health. Disease, on the other hand, occurs when there is an imbalance between these doshas. Surapala applied this theory to plants as well, providing a number of recipes for plant protection and treatment depending upon the particular dosha imbalance affecting the plant. Many of the ingredients he lists are milk, ghee, honey, licorice, cow urine and dung, various liquid manures, mustard, pastes made out of various barks and roots, asafoetida, turmeric, sesame oil, salt and ash. The chapter Nivasasana Taru Shubha Shubha Lakshana is full of many fascinating proposals. A perfect dwelling must have Peril in the east, Athi in the south, Arail in the west and Ithi in the north, but they should never be planted too near to the house. In a similar context, Vagbhatacharya also very strongly advised people against spending the night in the shade of trees. The chapter Taru Mahima has a different story to relate. It declares that 10 walls are equivalent to 1 pond, 10 ponds are equivalent to 1 lake, 10 lakes are equivalent to 1 sun, and 10 suns are equivalent to 1 tree. A more convincing inference could have never arrived to emphasize the importance of trees and to show the amount of love, honor and attention with which they were treated. Taru Mahima announces that a man attains the highest conceivable perfection by planting trees. It was believed that the Almighty lives with those who plant trees that yield edible fruits. The chapter Upvana Kriya is dense with instructions on detaching upon the organization, cultivation and preservation of gardens. The chapter Chitrikaran depicts some astounding techniques and feats which leave the modern scientists stunned. The ancient scholars possessed systematic knowledge of unparalleled performances and manipulations conducted to force fragrance to a non-fragrant flower and color to a colorless one, to make a plant bloom throughout the year, bring forth maturity or prematurity to plants and fruits, and change the shape and form of trees. All these observations led one to accept Surapala's text as an independent, full-fledged work on the subject of Vrikshayurveda. Surapala is so modest as to confess that this wisdom earned and stored in his book Vrikshayurveda should not be considered an achievement exclusively of his own. What he says here is the result of probing a wealth of knowledge hidden in the dedicated works of enlightened and accomplished saints and sages of ancient times, striving towards the attainment of the real essence and truth of knowledge. Vrikshayurveda also includes topics like pest and disease management, nomenclature and taxonomy, description and classification of plants to get varied purposes, favorable and unfavorable meteorological conditions, use of plants as indicators of water, weather and minerals, as well as botanical marvels. The Indian Council of Agricultural Research has documented 4879 indigenous practices in the field of traditional plant science. A set of 111 indigenous technical practices were selected and subjected to experimental testing and validation in efforts that were conducted by several ICAR institutes and state agricultural departments and universities across the country. These pertain to various topics such as pest control, crop protection, farm implements, weather forecasting, etc. And it was shown that slightly more than 80% of these practices were valid and about 6% were partly valid. Vrikshayurveda promises many new areas for fresh research initiatives like the study of meteorological conditions that are suitable for various agricultural operations in the cultivation of crops, increasing plant growth and yield, testing and classification of soil, and use of plants as indicator for water, minerals, and weather. The diversity of animal life has been well captured in the ancient literature of India. The canons of Charaka and Sushruta classify animals on the basis of their habitat and predatory behavior. Animals are classified on the basis of habitat into terrestrial, underground, aquatic, aerial, and marshy types. On the basis of predatory behavior, animals are prey snatchers, peckers, or attackers. In different texts, animals have been classified on the basis of varied criteria. One classification distinguishes animals by number of feet and another by the presence or absence of hoofs. The Matsya Purana classifies animals on the basis of their activity into diurnal, nocturnal, or both. Animals reproduce sexually or asexually. The text also speaks of life emerging from moisture and heat as well as from head vegetation. A number of animals have been described in the context of food and dietetics. The medicinal and nutritional properties of meat from a variety of animal sources have been documented in the classical text of Ayurveda. The food web and food chain have been described, highlighting the principle that one form of life is food for another, or Jivo Jivasya Jivanam. The branch of veterinary medicine was well developed in ancient India and was devoted to the well-being of domesticated animals like cows, horses, and elephants. Till date, veterinary herbal medicines are manufactured and marketed by pharmaceutical firms in India. Earliest references to them can be seen in Vedic literature. Hai Ayurved of Salihotra is an ancient textbook of veterinary medicine that classifies horses and describes treatments for horses apart from providing accounts of anatomy. Salihotra composed many treatises on horses, which were translated into Arabic, Persian, and Tibetan. A treatise on Gajayurved devoted to elephants was composed by Palakapya, which deals with treatment of diseases afflicting elephants. Gajayurved is still practiced by traditional experts in states like Kerala. The Mrigapakshi Shastra by Hansadeva, composed in the 13th century CE, gives fascinating descriptions of animals and birds. People of ancient India lived in close proximity with nature and were keen observers of animal life. It has been mentioned in some texts that the first clues regarding medicinal properties of plants can be discovered from animal behavior. Thus, ancient Indian literature has one of the earliest documented evidence of the practice of zoopharmacognosy, that is, the discovery of medicinal uses of plants by observing how animals eat specific plants when they suffer from a disease, have worms, or have been bitten by a snake. The texts of Ayurveda also talk about confirming the toxicity of substances by administering test doses to animals, perhaps the earliest account of animal experiments in toxicology. There are about 4,600 ethnic communities in India which have lived in close proximity with nature and nurtured a folk system of medicine. It is estimated that there are 1 million specialized carriers of folk medicine, outnumbering the number of paramedics on the payroll of government. The richness of the biodiversity and the climatic and geographic variations were highlighted in ancient writings. Different geographical regions were described along with the cycle of 6 seasons, setting the stage for variations in biodiversity. It is mentioned in Ayurvedic texts that there is a variation of biodiversity in terms of flora and fauna as well as human lives and habits over a span of 12 yojanas or 96 miles. Ancient Indians estimated that there are nearly 8.4 million yonis or species of life on Earth. This comes strikingly close to the recent estimate of modern scientists at 8.7 million species. Sushruta proclaims that one must hunt for the earth is bountiful everywhere.